James, thank you so much, because you've touched on quite a bit of what is important with regards to market access, and I'm glad, like, you spoke about the value proposition and differentiating yourself from the market. Now, normally, when I'm sort of like looking at a product to introduce it to a market, I try and split the introduction of it into 3 phases. It's like, I just remember somebody saying this to me many, many years ago. It's like, how do you eat an elephant? I mean, I wouldn't, I'm a vegetarian, so I wouldn't, but if you were to, it's one bit at a time. So it's about understanding the different segments needed. So for me, the phase 1 would be sizing your current market. What is the market size? What is the opportunity for yourself? And quantify the potential for yourselves. Are you a unique product? Are you a me too? Or are you a product that has got improvements on something that's already in the market? So it's just really differentiating that and understanding what absolute value that is. Now, I normally say once you've done that analysis, and that desk research can be going on whilst you're thinking about your initial product. So even if that product is still just an idea on paper, it's really worth looking at the market size and market opportunity. So it's not a stepped approach per se. So it's not, we'll do the product first and then we'll do the licensing, then we'll do that. It can all be done at the same time if you're working collaboratively across your whole organisation. So once completed, you can then begin to strategise. So once you know your market opportunity, you know the market size, you know the market value, you've worked out who the market leaders are, why are they market leaders, why are they considered gold standard? Is it because they were first to market, or is it because they are literally all singing, all dancing? And what is your product going to be able to offer alongside that gold standard? And where is your product going to be sitting in the hierarchy of products available in your particular market? Once you've done all of that desk research, you then start quantifying it and start creating your commercialised strategy. And then you get ready for your phase 2. Now, the phase 2, I mean, I've kept everything very, very simple on this, but it's a defining and delivering your commercialisation strategy. So I've spoken about pricing, reimbursement if it is valid for your product area and the market you're in. And once you've created that commercialised strategy, that is where you start looking at your value proposition. Now, when people talk about value proposition, you always think about, well, what value? Is it because I'm cheaper and I can save you that much? But a value proposition is actually so much more than just product A costs you £2. My product will cost you £1.50. I'm going to save you 50 pence per product. That's the most basic, but that doesn't give enough value. So understand, what value are you bringing to the companies that you're dealing with? So if you are selling, say, to the NHS, what value are you bringing to the NHS? Have you looked at the health economics? Because that is also part and parcel. When I talk about health economics, and I'm going to relate this specifically to the NHS and the medical market, is how long does it take for a patient to actually be diagnosed with the particular therapy area that you're specialising in? Once they've been diagnosed, how long does it take for them to get the initial treatment? If initial treatment doesn't work, how long before they get the second treatment? So actually putting absolute timelines in and then quantifying that in cost. So how much is it actually costing the NHS and the wider economy for not utilising your product? And then what can you bring? What value are you bringing? Are you bringing any educational support? Are you bringing extra training? Are you bringing tangible goods that the NHS or your partners can use? And that really adds to the value proposition. One more thing I would add is to actually forecast into the future. So show them what they're doing currently, how much that is costing them, and based on the growth of cost, how much are they going to be paying the following year, and then the year after, then the year after, then the year after. Then taking into account your product, if they were to switch to your product, even though your product might be slightly higher in price, how much are they actually going to be saving long term? These are sort of like tried strategies that have actually worked, which meant that I was able to get products onto guidelines that were actually £1.50 more expensive than the products they had on the guideline. But I was able to show cost savings of anything from 25,000 to £250,000, which meant I was able to get the cheaper competitors removed off the guidelines and have the more expensive products added on, because actually ultimately 5 years down the line they were going to be saving them a lot more money. And that's what it is. Now, what I will say is, when you are creating the value proposition, it's okay, we don't know everything. Like for me, I'm a market access specialist, but if you asked me about regulatory or licensing, I literally wouldn't have a clue, because that's not my area of expertise. Therefore, don't be afraid to bring somebody on. It's worth the investment of, contracting somebody to come in, work with you for, 3 to 6 months, even up to a year, to get your strategy correct, because then you will actually see a return on investment. An example would be an organisation that was, making £32,000 a year on a particular product. Investing in the right market access meant that they were growing by £250,000 a year. So it's the tangible value that the contractor will bring in, or employ somebody that has got that specialism. So somebody that understands data analytics, that can turn that data into a story that you can use for your value proposition. Once you've created that, you then can track, your phase 3 is track and measuring the launch success. Okay, so can we just do the next one, please? I've spoken about this, so I'm not going to go too much into it, because I have just spoken about this. But when we're talking about the market opportunity, having a strong COMEX, commercial excellence capability, is key to your financial success going forward. And there are a handful of COMEX specialists that really are worth their weight in gold when it comes to getting that strategy correct and getting the value proposition and getting all the analysis in place that will allow you to create a sales strategy that will get you the pull through of sales. Okay, and the next one, please. Thank you. Now, when we're looking at a product concept, and I spoke earlier about sort of like when we're looking at our market access side of things and doing an initial dipping your toe into the market, having a product concept, once you've done all of your value, your analysis, your commercial excellence, working alongside your marketing team to then create the right documentation that you can share with your potential clients, then creating a product concept which you're testing alongside your marketing collateral, so your leaflets, your online presence, your email campaigns, your social media campaigns, etc., with each of the key stakeholders within each market segment. So again, my experience has been within pharma and medical devices, but you may have a product where you're not going to be working with the NHS per se, you might be working with a private provider. The concept still stands, this methodology still stands. So your key stakeholders, the way I would look at it, would be your payer stakeholders, so your commissioners, your guidelines, decision makers, and potentially procurement if you're selling within a hospital environment. And with procurement, you might have central procurement. So, for example, there's NHS supply chain for the NHS. They have a commercial arm, SCCS, so it might be worth setting yourselves up an account with NHS supply chain and SCCS, so that if you need to pull off any data, you can pull off that data. And I'm going to sort of like ask Pretty in a moment just to sort of give you an idea in terms of, if you're looking in the medical side, where the best place is to search for that data. I'll do this and then I'll come to you. So the key stakeholders, again, your key opinion leaders, who are those who are going to be, in the words of like Casey Hughes, who are going to be the disruptors, who are going to be happy to trial something new. Target them, your service managers, finding your advocates and your product appropriate buying groups. And then looking at your end users, your end users, i.e. your patients or the prescribers if it's within the medical side of things. Your key clinicians, your consumers, your key wholesalers, your key buying groups, okay? And I've put in there sort of like pharmacists, if appropriate. And like I say, this is just an example, but again, it's about following a strategic pathway, a logical pathway. In terms of finding data, Pretty, you've got a lot of experience with finding that data.
Yeah, I mean, data per se is available online. Open Prescribing is a data portal for products that you've developed which work in the medical pharmaceutical field. The other data can come from various different companies. We're working with a company that provides data called Viewit, and they're amazing. They've got very many different data sets that you can plough into, including HEOR, referral rates, discharge rates, etc. Within the medical devices framework, there's a few firms around the table which have got devices to offer, and it's really looking at the right person to get the accommodation for that device. And it could be an academic, it could be a researcher within the university. Then trying to run that pilot with them. And again, when we mentioned procurement, if you are looking to get into the wider healthcare market, there are frameworks that the government sends out. Frameworks are portals that you can go on, log in, your company details, and you will become a preferred supplier. There's a lot of criteria that you have to meet, but again, it is a way forward if you want to sell into the NHS. Because once you become on their sort of preferred list, it's a lot easier to get your products used by university hospitals, which are big, areas for research and development. Again, a lot of the innovative products that you all have will reach that sort of avenue. So it's another route to market access, and then data is openly available. But like I said, there are specific companies that will just hone in on specific data that you want, and they're not as expensive as the likes of IQVIA and Segidem and all these other people who give you data, but it's all parts of that data, and it's not really relevant for what you're trying to do. That's from my experience.
So taking a real tailored approach, it's just worth the investment, because I know when we're all startups, because I'm in the process of starting up a new organisation as well, but when we're startups, we do think about the finances, but if we make the investment at the beginning, it will pay dividends towards the end. And in terms of Pretty touched on sort of like the categories. So NHS supply chain are now the main supplier of products into the NHS hospital landscape. So they work on category towers, and they've got about 20 different category towers. But if you go onto NHS supply chain and then SCCS and just register yourselves as providers, you can then start looking on their website to see what tenders are going out and start pitching for those tenders. And again, it's definitely worth bringing on board somebody who is adept at writing bids, writing tenders, because that will make a huge difference. Because the tenders, once the tender process is closed, they go into PERDA and you're not allowed to talk to them. But having somebody who is an expert tender writer will make a big, big difference. So can we get the next slide, please?
That with going across funding streams as well.
Yeah.
Again, you need good bid writers for that.
Yeah. So, we've spoken, sort of touched on a few things. We walked around it, and please feel free to ask questions. If you want to ask me questions as I'm going through, feel free to. If you want to wait till the end, that's fine as well. But once you've got all of those bits in place, the commercialisation strategy can then be defined and delivered. So we'd start with, executing an advanced notification campaign, and that would be to your key advocates. those who are influencers. So if you're, say, I don't know, if you're, for example, you have like with the product that you do, you could actually utilise a social media campaign and utilise the influencers across TikTok and Instagram to really push forward the product you're doing. Because if we look at the demographics of people using those platforms, they are a lot more aware than those of us who are from an older generation for whom mental health is, just stiff upper lip, keep calm, carry on. Whereas the younger generation are a lot more open to that. So that could be, one of the avenues you take. If you've got a medical device that is specifically hospital only, then it's about finding the key consultants, the key surgeons, or the key doctors or nurses that will be using that product and getting them on board as your key opinion leaders and utilising them to build education workshops that they can then use. The other thing I would say, if it's a medical device, it would be worth, once you've got all the licensing in place, it would also be worth speaking to people like James and Pretty and utilising their skill set and services to be involved with the medical school. And I'll give you an example of that. We have a lot of laparoscopic surgeries happening because that is, far less invasive. It's a better recovery time, etc. Now, Ethicon have been the market leaders. They've been gold standard for years. Their products are absolutely fantastic quality. They are very expensive, more expensive than the likes of, say, Purple Surgical or... the name has just gone from my head, it begins with M, but there are a few others that are single-use, laparoscopic, but why do the hospitals, the private hospitals, continue using Ethicon? Because Ethicon actually supply products in the universities. When they're training their doctors and their medics and the nurses, Ethicon are providing those products. So if you have got a device that you want to be used within the hospital setting with your consultants, then, speaking to these guys to see how they can, formulate a meeting with the medical department to actually get your product used as part of the education. Because when a medic uses a product when they're still studying, they keep the loyalty to it. And that's another avenue in. And that, again, is just creating that market. So the advanced notification campaign, like I say, is a series of things. So you can either do a telephone campaign, it could be an email, it could be social media, it could be building up the relationships that we've just said, but just making sure that those that need to know, those who are going to be responsible for commissioning your product or for procuring it or for for actually recommending that it's used in the hospital, they're the ones that you need to really get for the advanced notification campaign, your payers, your commissioners, etc. Step 2 is designing and delivering the launch and market access campaigns, and that's where you utilise a really strong market access value proposition, which we spoke about right at the beginning. Once you've done your market access campaigns and you've got those guidelines, your strategy, and again, I'm talking mainly about the pharmaceutical side and those where you need to have guidelines in the community and hospital. Once you have got that in place, you then create a sales pull-through strategy, which needs to be based on your guidelines. Okay. So, yeah. So next slide. These ones are going to be really quick. I mean, like your phase 1 can take anything from 30 days up to 6 months. It depends on how thorough you are. It depends on whether you're actually buying in the data from a specialist organisation or if you're going to be doing your own research. But yeah, I'd say anything from 30 days to 6 months, and that includes your data analysis, your desk research, your sizing your market opportunity, and then starting to put the foundations together for your value proposition. Okay. Your next phase 2 and phase 3, the commercialisation phase, is, again, that can take, once you've done your initial research, your phase 2, the executing the advanced notification, can be a 30 to 60 day project. Bearing in mind, to get something on guidelines, you can either get somebody to put it on guidelines immediately, or it could take up to a year before they're added onto guidelines. So it all depends on the market that you're working towards. You're then designing and delivering your launch and market access campaigns. Your step 2, creating value proposition based on market value, market dynamics, and health economics. I pretty touched on HEOR, which is the health economics outcomes research, i.e., how is your product going to help the wider economy, not just the prescription market, not just the NHS market, but how is it going to help the wider market? And again, it's really important to get a specialist in who deals with HEOR, who will be able to get you that data. And then, the implementation of sales pull-through strategy. And that is an ongoing cycle. You do need to define your project leadership team. So, for example, I would always have, if I'm to start as a startup, I would always have somebody who is a commercial excellence specialist, somebody who is a marketing and sales specialist who can work with the ComEx, and you need your medical and regulatory, because we can't do it all, and we do need to bring people on board to do that. And again, these are just examples I'm using, but you can define your own. Now, if I'm looking at an NHS strategy, I'm actually going to create 5 teams. Once I'm ready for my sales pull-through, I will create 5 teams based on geography. So you've got the devolved nations, your Scotland, Ireland and Wales, because they work very differently to the UK market. And they work very differently to each other, okay? So you would need to have somebody who is specialised within those devolved nations. I'd look at the North East, the North West, the East Midlands and the South East, and the West Midlands and the South West. But you can go even further and split it into 10 teams, depending on the healthcare organisations or what your product area is going to be. But again, this is just an example of what I've used. You just need to work with your ComEx team to make sure that you're getting the right structure in place. And then near to the end, once it's launched, it's really important, continue reviewing. If you need to make adjustments, that's okay. It's just keep reviewing it, keep making the alterations, keep changing. Don't be afraid to pivot. Don't be afraid to, let me change those words, use the NLP. Be brave enough to pivot. Be brave enough to say, actually, this isn't working. We're going to go down this route now. It's okay to do that, because if you're continuously reviewing, and I would probably say every 3 months, reviewing every 3 months will allow you to be far more proactive rather than being reactive. The companies that do really well are always the proactive ones. The ones who do so-so are the reactive. Then by the time you're reacting to the market, you might have missed the boat. So always be proactive, and that's why the reviewing, and don't be afraid to sort of hold your hands up and say, okay, this isn't working, let's move on. Okay. So lastly, points to note, understand that you will not know everything, and it's okay to not know everything. As entrepreneurs, as business people, as seniors in various companies, sometimes we are led by our egos. And we've all done it, we've all been led by our egos. Sometimes we just need to park those egos and say, actually, I don't know, I need to bring somebody in. Knowing and accepting that you lack knowledge is actually a huge positive for your organisation, because when you are very much I know everything about everything and I can do it all on my own, you literally will be on your own, okay? And as they say, no man is an island. Well, there's a reason there's that saying, because, we can't do it on our own. Once you know what it is you don't know, it's imperative that you bring in the experts. It's okay to invest money in experts. In fact, I would probably say that you're doing the right thing by bringing in experts. And just remember, somebody who is good at what they do are not going to be cheap. And it's that saying, if you pay peanuts, you're going to get monkeys. And the number of times organisations have said, well, we can get somebody to do it cheaper. They've gone to somebody cheaper, and then they've ultimately come back because the cheaper person wasn't able to do what they needed them to do. And then they are 2 years behind where they needed to be. And we've had, in our previous life as management consultant, we've had the experience of an innovative product that actually should have been in every single hospital, but they wanted to do everything on the cheap. Ultimately, it has resulted in them being 2 years, 3 years, in fact, behind where they should have been, and they launched in 2019, and they are still at the beginning stages. So it's that whole, adage of, I want, the petrol station 10 miles away is 1p cheaper, so I'm going to drive 10 miles to save a penny per gallon. Don't do it. And don't be afraid to pivot. If something is not working, be brave enough to shout, plot twist, and find a way to make it work. And that's it. And just remember, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So when we work collectively, work collaboratively, we will get much better outcomes. Okay, and then any questions?
Thank you for that, Nidhi. It was really insightful. So are there any questions from the delegates and the table?
What were the names of the 2 data companies that you didn't recommend?
IQVIA.
IQVIA and Sedgedem, yeah.
Sedgedem, yeah. They'll charge you an absolute arm and a leg.
And you'll just get basic information, and a lot of the information is not actually accurate.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a question? So when you're dealing with NHS trusts, if you've got a new product, are you better off trying to get into one trust and slowly testing it via one trust before moving into other trusts? And if you got into one trust, does that automatically make you come into another trust? Can you automatically go into another trust if it's something completely new?
Yeah, no. The best way to do that is never just to try put all your eggs in one basket, because the NHS works so differently. It's just one of the... I've never known an organisation like it, to be honest. It's just like literally the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing, and they will waste pounds to save pennies. So what I would do is, if you have got a product, depending on what it is, whether it's if it's a device, then you would really need to start working with NHS supply chain first, making sure you're registered with them, and then speak to procurement, and then start speaking to the consultants, because procurement are the gatekeepers within the NHS trusts. But I wouldn't ever do just one trust. I would actually be strategic and look at which are the trusts that are known to be innovators, and which trusts are the ones that are using the product, or similar products to what you're trying to launch. And then I would probably start with those first, just to get some information from them, and then work around that. But you need to find the trust that are deemed as the gold standard trust to follow. So, for example, if we're looking at paediatrics, Great Ormond Street is the one that is seen as a centre of excellence. Surprisingly enough, Sunderland is seen as a centre of excellence, and Alderhay for children's hearts is seen as a centre of excellence, because one of the consultants there is absolutely phenomenal, and he's saved thousands of children's lives. So it's about finding the trust that is a centre of excellence, finding out what it is that they need, and then building around there. But I wouldn't go with just one trust.
Once you're in a trust with a centre of excellence,
if it's a centre of excellence, it can. But each trust, it depends on the procurement team, it depends on the consultants. Because, again, you're dealing with egos. Because if you are dealing with sort of like senior consultants, they may not want to follow what another consultant has done, because there's a level of ego competition goes on there. But, yeah, if you've got it into a centre of excellence, yes, but I wouldn't put all my eggs in one basket, is my short answer. But it all depends on the product, and you'd need to really do your research around it.
We've got more, but obviously.
Are there any other... no, feel free.
Okay, I've got 3 questions. So, what are the respiratory centres of excellence that you know? You just mentioned one about children's, which I recognise those names, Alderhay.
Yeah. Respiratory, well, I would say Leicester. Yeah. Leicester is actually one of the leading.
That's a good reply for a Leicester event.
Yeah. Leicester is one, UCL are another centre of excellence, I would say. And I would probably, I don't know if Leeds is Leeds University Hospital. But the two off the top of my head are UCL and Leicester. Leicester is leading.
Southampton as well. I mean, I'm wrong there.
Southampton General Hospital is an extremely good research hospital.
Right.
So if you're engaged in research,
somebody is a passing comment. Somebody mentioned it, but to do with respiratory, I might be wrong.
And they're very tuned into how technology gets into.
So maybe Leicester leads UCL and
Southampton. I mean, that's just a generic thing about Southampton.
Yeah,
They're very research intensive, and they kind of get the game that we're in.
I was at GSK, and a lot of the respiratory guys there worked with Cambridge, but I think that was, I probably didn't say they were probably not a centre of excellence in respiratory, but they were always a very, it was, big.
Addenbrooke's they're the hardest one to get into.
Yeah.
No.
Built on by now. The extra bit of hospital built on that one. Oh no, AstraZeneca will be built on that now.
They've also Abcam are there as well.
Yeah.
Abcam at the Cambridge site, but I mean Addenbrooke's, yes, but with Addenbrooke's, it's the procurement team are quite tough. So if you can build a good relationship with the procurement team, then you'll potentially get into Addenbrooke's.
Can I just share one on procurement actually, and it was actually from an event here, a Medilink event. So a lot of people wanted to get into the NHS, and there was actually one company that had actually developed a medical device that was actually for the treatment of rectal tumours in essence, but it was using X-rays. And then they went to try and get on sort of the NHS procurement, and they had a look at all the different, and their actual technology was not there. So they were, how can we sell into the NHS when the technology is not there? So what where Nidhi referred to all of the different towers, each of those will have a team in essence managing it. So literally these towers can be things for like tongue depressors and breast implants and everything. Literally, I think there's about 200,000 items or more that they have. But what each will have a clinical lead, but then a procurement lead as well. And actually, it's better if you've got a product that sort of, because you can have them where they sort of sit outside, or they might sit across a couple of different towers, especially if your product can do a lot of things. So it's sometimes best to get to know those, and they are very receptive to actually getting speaking. And actually, I think working with the academic health science networks as well. So there's 15 academic health science networks around the country that basically their bread and butter is to try and get innovations into the NHS. One of the barriers that you'll face with any company that has got a great product is like you've innovated, you've launched, and then you want to sell into the NHS, and that's the biggest barrier. And actually, that's one of the Jane. I think one company we've supported. I'm thinking of Shifa. They've actually decided to go to other territories just because it's easier to go to other markets. But that's inherently they developed a device for low and middle income countries, so it makes sense for them to go. But that's why it's always dynamic.
You're talking about the different stages and the TRL stages. So if we're at a 2, how common is it to duck out before you actually take it to market? Because obviously, not everybody's, as you said, not everybody's an expert in everything, and so we might decide to take it to a certain level and then say, hey, we've got a great device, GSK, come on, buy this off us, and you take it in because you've got all the connections, you can get it in tomorrow, whereas we could take 2 years doing it.
I review grants all the time and Innovate UK grants, and so one of the best things when people say what's their route to market and who's their customer is for them to tell me that they're going to partner to co-develop it commercially. Because quite frankly, as a startup, they'll never be able to develop it. So recognising that you can take your technology so far, and then you need the help of the clinicians, you need the help.
Yeah, so what percentage, have you got a sort of in your head a percentage of businesses that actually take it to a certain TRL level and then say, oh, we've got the product now, but actually get it into the hospital and get it to market and get the product?
All of them it's almost,
So you need,
the majority.
I realise you need clinical partners, but you need business partners as well.
Yeah. Yes, because I think they've got the route. They've got the route to market.
They've got the distribution.
It is the route to market. You as an individual are never going to establish a route to market into the NHS.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So somebody who has got a route to market, they're always looking for new products, aren't they? I mean, that's the other thing that businesses have to do. They need your technology as much as you need their.
But I'd probably say, what would you say, about 7 out of 10 potentially will develop a product and then find a potential buyer. And route to markets are really hard, but they're not impossible if you can actually find investors. I mean, like you've touched on angel investors. There are loads of VIs sort of, that are looking to invest but not get involved. So if you can find somebody who is...
That's exactly my next question. You've glazed over the hard bit, which is you've got the ideas, and then we're on to, well, we've got our product now and we're taking it to market. But actually, forget from the idea to actually get the product, you need to get the clinical research, you need to get the health economics, you need to get and all those, you need to pay these experts, and I'm sure some of you guys are experts. So we need to actually get the funding for that. Yeah. So the key thing for us is getting the funding. Yes. So that's the bit you haven't covered yet. So hopefully at some point you might cover that.
We are going to gloss over that. The reason that we are going to do that is because actually the funding is so specific for the companies. I'm happy to discuss it further.
Great.
We do
that.
I would say one take home with any of this is if you are developing a product, you have got to look to put your own money in. Sure. You've got to put a skin in the game. Like being honest, I've had a few companies that have come to us and they've been quite shocked. It's like, oh, I can't get funding to develop this. I'm like, well, you've got to put your own money in because you've got to believe in your product.
I think the belief in the product is spending money on IP, for example.
But doing it at the right time as well. So, there are different stages of sort of the funding rounds. Like, I would say we have actually supported a couple of companies through the LLSA. Like one company we've supported, he was a graduate of the Loughborough University. He's won a James Dyson Award. He's done really well, and he's secured I can't say how much, but a substantial amount of funding. But he's put he's gone to his friends and family, put money in, and now he's at the point that he's actually built his own team, and actually I'd say he's in the minority because he's actually built it all up, but he's brought people in, like he needed a product expert and everything else like that. But there's different avenues to actually look at how you can get funding. But from an investor's perspective, it's how can they de-risk their... So from a pharmaceuticals perspective, like Charnwood Molecular will work with, and I'll refer to the pharmaceutical companies. From a university, you may have, say, a professor that has developed a new assay or a new drug, therapeutic target. They can develop it on the bench, but to actually get it into clinic and actually like clinical trials and actually get a drug made, they need the infrastructure of the large pharmaceutical company. So we'll have a small biotech, but then also we're not centred on innovation, but at the back of your mind you need to think about the fail fast approach. And what I mean is the further you go down, so if you're about to sort of launch something, you'll have probably spent millions on that, and actually you're better to sort of start test the market early on and do all the right things, and then say actually there's not a market for it, and then come out. Or actually, do you need to sort of go back and redefine the product, the value proposition? And actually, sometimes a lot of companies or how they're shaping, it's based around one product. What's unique with the person from Loughborough is that he's got one idea, but then in his back pocket he's got a few other ideas. So it's not just a one-trick pony. So I know there's a lot of conflicting things there. But are there any?
Yeah, I was going to say. Sorry.
What we're trying to do. We're out of our market. Okay, so we've got a lot of expertise in manufacturing, a lot of expertise in global launches and so on. But medical is out of our market. What we want to do is we want to develop the product to be adopted. So in that process we need to go through the pathway of getting the product ready medically. Now that's going to involve clinical trials, that's going to involve health benefit audits and so on and so forth. Now what we need help with is defining each of those stages and knowing when we pay for them that if our journey changes and it's not NHS in terms of where we're going, did we do the right study? Did we do the right health audit? So we would like to know if there's kind of a generic product acceptance at different stages that we can pay for, that then puts us in a position where, whether we sell in Europe, whether we sell to the NHS, we've got the right accreditations for the product.
I was going to say, NIHR, so the National Institute for Health Research, they're very good at also finding funding for research. That doesn't necessarily have to be NHS. If it's medical, it's part of it, but NIHR, they work with a number of hospitals. They might be worth contacting just to see sort of like what you can do. And they have people within each territory anyway. So if you just ring the central number and just say, this is what you want to do, who could you speak to, they could potentially put you in touch with the right people.
My issues are quite granular because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to establish the budget. And do I need a study with 50 people in it? Do I need a study with 100 people in it? Does that study has to be covering, you know, the intuitiveness of the device or the effectiveness of the medicine in it? I need to map the costs of all of the pathway so that I can create a budget, and then I know with £2 million or whatever the figure is, we can get the product to the stage where it can be adopted.
Could I ask you, do you have a scientist that is already working with you on the product, or are you the scientists?
No, we're not scientists at all. So we are improving an existing product which we've patented, and we know that the patient outcomes from our product is better because people are slicing bread with a knife and we've sliced bread with a machine. So we know that sliced bread is sliced bread. So we know the outcomes are there because the mixing of the medicines is already happening, but in a much more less scientific way. So we're mixing existing medicines in a more significantly better way. So
my question to that is, if you've taken a product and made it better, so the product that is in the market at the moment, do you know who are the main users who are the main sort of like advocates for that product? And could you work with those? So say, for example, I don't know, I've got a bottle and I'm a great drinker of San Pellegrino. So I'm already drinking this, but Bobby has got a water that is better than this. He can come to me and be like, right, we want to make it better. Could you be involved? And I might be involved. So is there a clinician that is already utilising the product that is in the market that you could bring on board as part of the research and development?
There are papers written with clinicians and professors trying to do what we've done in a less efficient way. So there are people trying to do what we've achieved in a sort of a more mechanical way. And we know who our end buyer of the product is, but what we also know is to reach our end buyer, we need to turn up with a product that's passed. And what we're trying to do is establish all the things we've got to pay for to get to that pass line, so we then can go and have a sensible conversation with, you know, our end purchaser of our product. And that's the bit I'm struggling with, you know, how big is the clinical trial, who runs it?
So if you get a clinician that is already using the product, so my steps, how I would do it, would be A, to find the clinician that is advocating current product, speak to them, speak to NIHR, because they can actually then give you that advice as to whether you just need to do it on 10. I mean, like, these guys have got far more knowledge in terms of clinical trials, but I know it's all down to the statistical value. They call it the p-value. So you could do a clinical trial with just 10 people, but if the statistical data and the analysis is there and it shows that actually this product worked efficaciously on 8 of the 10 people, but because of the p-value, we know that if we had 100 people, it would still be the same. So it's not so much the size of the population you're going to use for the trial, it's going to be the hypothesis that you put through, the stats around it, and then doing it, but you would need to get a clinician on board who is happy to run that trial for you, speak to NIHR, who can then find the funding, and then also the academic science network as well. Speak to all three. So speak to those two organisations and get a couple of clinicians that would be happy, because all clinicians would love to have their names on, groundbreaking clinical trial.
But how do we, with no connections in this industry and with no experience of getting, if you talk to me about getting a product through FDA in America for cosmetic, I can tell you how to do it. But if you talk to me about medical, I can't. So how do we map out what we need to do? Because it's all very well going and getting a clinical trial when you don't know what your clinical trials are all about.
No, it's good.
So,
the key, it's your NIH. No, we'll network you in. These people do networking. Yeah. You need to be networked into NIHR and AHSN. They're both government funded. They were put in place because companies couldn't get new products into the NHS.
Yeah.
So the government has funded these two organisations. They have their own funding streams that you should be able to map into.
Right.
So, we can talk about it in more detail later, because that's exactly what an accelerator
does. Yeah, it's just I'm trying to, I don't have any part of the jigsaw.
Okay, we can give you an outline
I need the road
I
map.
think by the end of the day, you should have a bit more, and there's completely different options. Like I've got a few thoughts already, so I'm happy to share those. Yeah. Casey, I know you've got a question.
Oh, yeah. So we were talking about sort of as an innovator, in order to get to the concept or whatever stage that we need to do, is to bring partners. Do you have statistically, by the time you've given away some of the shares and bring in the partners, as an innovator, where on average, I guess it's a shocking number probably, in terms of what percentage of share in that business would you end up with?
So, I actually, yes and no. So, if you talking from a spin-out perspective from a university, so I'm going to just as a university, universities are coming up with new ideas, but a lot of them are what's termed fundamental research. And what I mean by that, that's sort of TRL level 1, actually looking at sort of the ways a mechanism of a cell works or other things like that. What actually in the day-to-day world is not going to actually have any impact. But you get translational research, so that's getting from the lab out into the world. Now, universities can look at doing this in a lot of different ways. So you might have, say, one example would be, I made a new bit of code that could actually make Alexa understand if I'm northern, say. So Amazon's like, oh, I want to take that, and they'll pay a license for that. A lot of, say, pharmaceuticals and other things like that, if there's a target that's been identified by a university group, a pharmaceutical company would pay a license for that. Another mechanism for universities to sort of get their technologies out is spin out. So they'll start spin out companies. Abcam's a really good example. There's a lot of, so you've got sort of the big players are, say, Oxford, Cambridge, Imperial are brilliant at spinning out companies. Oxford University Innovations is like the best in the world. But generally, they would spin a company out, and the founders would have around 20% equity. Now, as that company goes along and, say, if it does an IPO, what's an initial public offering, go into the market, it actually gets diluted. So
you're looking at 20 downwards.
Yeah,
average, right?
and Oxford will be keeping their bit of. Just give me a second. If you're doing it privately, it does vary, but it will get down to. I would actually say Sean to the left of you has probably got experience of running his own company, divesting, starting new company. So probably what I would suggest is in the networking session, let's have a bit of a chat, because I think there's experience in the room. Sorry to be, I'm just sort of on times. If there are further questions, keep them just a little bit later on, because I want Bobby to go, because we're into the next session, because we're already just running a little bit behind. But this is really good, and this is what I'm wanting from the day. And no question and no answer is right. And what I'd say is it changes. So you can write a business plan, and then COVID happens, and you go back and think about things. And of course, markets are always dynamic as well.